Hi there. Welcome to the Right Here, Right Now live show. This show has one simple question. What's on your heart and mind right here, right now in this moment? We explore the depths and breadths of our humanity through that one simple question over the course of 30 to 45 minutes. I hope that you'll join us. I hope you'll enjoy the exploration. And this tune was created for me personally by the incredible Peter Griffiths, one half of the amazing Mind Takeaway. Do let us know what you think. Let us know what you take away. And of course, we always welcome challenges too. Hope to see you on the exploration. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. If you're joining us, that's me and this amazing human, Nikki. Welcome to the show. How are you doing, Nikki? Are you well?
Oh, I'm fantastic this morning. How are you?
I am doing well. Sorry to you and for everyone. You see this light reflecting off my bald head. It just
You've
happens
got
to
an
be later
angel
here.
behind you. That's what it is.
My little halo needs polishing. But it's not about me today. I love that you've come back. Thank you, Nikki, for joining me on the Right Here, Right Now live show. I would love for you, before we go into the one key question today, just give a little bit of a lowdown on who is Nikki, what's your sort of world work at the moment. I'd love for you to let people get to know you a little bit.
I'm a human. I'm based in Austin, Texas. I am mum, wife. Work-wise, I work with family companies to take them from lifetime businesses to legacy businesses. Essentially, businesses that would outlive the founders. That's my jam. That's my work and my passion.
So cool. So cool. So tell us a little bit about, where did that come from? Has there been a particular sort of life experience for you that made that important, Nikki? Or
Yeah, I think to be honest, like looking the gift of hindsight, and I guess my whole life is kind of it's been a snowballing to this moment. But also there have been trigger events that would, looking back, the universe God, I believe, sent in my path to, signpost me to, hey, this is what you're called to do. And so I was born into a business family. My father started off our family business the year I was born, and it was always in the background. But flash forward after university, after working in accountancy for a few years, I decided to come back to Nigeria to work with him in the businesses. So my first-hand experience sparked a passion to ensure that this business would outlive him and outlive me and the kids. But then a friend of mine, her father passed away. So he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and he died within 3 months. And I watched as his death led to the death of the business. And the death of the business meant that my friend and her siblings and her mum literally were at the brink of, there was no security, there was no will, there was no insurance, no one really knew or understood the business. And it not only led to, financial insecurity, but also put tremendous stress and pressure on the family unit. Um, and that for me was my kind of wake up call, like, what's going on here? In Nigeria, only 2% of businesses historically would outlive the founders. And whilst that had become the norm, I strongly believe it's not normal. And there's a lot that can be done to improve that 2%. I mean, globally, that number is 33. So it's not all businesses that would transition to the second generation. However, I believe there's significant scope to do more work in the African context to improve that generational transition and transformation, because it not only impacts families like my friends, but it also impacts ecosystems, communities, and societies in a continent where, unfortunately, we have so much poverty. I believe that family businesses are the most amazing catalysts for change, not only in for the families, but also in society. They're uniquely placed to drive social change for many a reason, which I think I'll stop my
cool.
TED talk now.
Yeah. a great TED. Do you know something though? But it really captured my heart and also like my whole, because I want to come and ask, get into the crux of the key question today, Nikki. But yeah, you spoke to me in so many levels, particularly that one of the things that bugs me the most, and I'm learning like real time now, but also in the last 12 months in particular, like language is so pervasive, and like how Africa, that incredibly rich content that's been colonized and basically dominated, how can that be called the developing world? Like it does my head in. Anyway, different conversation. We'll come back to that one. So we'll see where we're going to go, but I'm really curious, Nikki, what is on your heart and mind right here, right now, in this moment, as the seed for our exploration today?
You know what? It's funny. It's probably the same that was on my heart the last time. And it's really, our world is so beladen with siloism and nationalistic thinking, and the pursuit of the capitalist machine without thought to our connected humanities and the social world, right? And just looking at the events over the last week with Omicron, whatever it's called, the variant, and just the unfair way in which a lot of governments have decided to treat and react to this, right? The variant was detected by a scientist in South Africa who alerted the world, oh my goodness, there's a new variant. And then suddenly a number of Western nations turn around and just, impose a travel ban on 7 Southern African countries. Meanwhile, this variant were present in Belgium, Netherlands, the UK, Canada, the US, and whilst there's no bans imposed on those nations. And to imply and to infer why that is probably economic might, right? So for a Western nation is doing a cost-benefit analysis, well, we can kind of afford to open the borders for the UK or Canada or Germany or Italy, because the money that they'll bring into the economy is stronger in trade and tourism and what have you. However, perhaps there's not as much to lose from closing the borders to Africa. And that was a wake-up call for many of us who have been, aspiring for this dream of collectivism and interdependence as a world. I think we had that conversation last time, right? And it's so obvious that the way we're dealing with this pandemic is, to me, it's just a microcosm of the way we're dealing with climate change as well, right? But it's so obvious that if we continue down this path, we're creating and exacerbating the social and economic issues, right? Because as the West continues to hoard vaccines and give no thought towards Africa's alleviation of this pandemic, variants will continue to be created all over the world, right? And we'll have more shutdowns. It'll have economic implications. It will have social implications. And so can we think and look at this issue from a different perspective? Not you versus me, but we, because we are a collective humanity. The least of us impacts on the best of us. So we are all at risk if any of us is at risk, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And our mutual friend Cornell Thomas introduced me to the African proverb of Ubuntu, and I think you spoke to that perfectly, exactly what you just shared, right? Like we doesn't matter where you sit in the world, we have to wake up to the fact that something happening, like butterfly effect, the decision I make, this phone that I buy isn't just a phone, right? It's an impact on communities far away from me in terms of the raw materials, in terms of how far that's traveled. So I just think, there's a huge opportunity for this collectivism and this connection to be built. But at the same time, it feels like we're being pulled further apart by a select few. And it's so, I'm wondering what you think, what are some of the practical steps? What's your invitation around this? It's on your heart and mind, Nikki, but I'm wondering if someone's watching us right now going, this is so big, it's so overwhelming. I really understand what Nikki's saying, but who am I to do anything about it? Like, what's my responsibility, or what can I do? Do you have any sort of invitations or recommendations to those people in this moment?
I think the macro is a reflection of the micro. And we don't necessarily all have direct influence over the macro, but we all do have a choice over the micro. And that is really modeling empathy, modeling interdependence, modeling thinking through not just me, but we. And we've been conditioned in our education, in the media, to pursuit of financial success is primary, but we've not been conditioned to think through the implications over time and over space of this sheer, financial maximization, profit maximization, wealth maximization. And I think it's an invitation for us to stop. And like you said, recognize that that phone is not just your phone, but it's child workers potentially in Congo. It's, destroying the planet, which I learned recently that we have a 1 in 60 chance that over the next 100 years, the Earth will not exist due to climate change risk. So I think it can be overwhelming. It can feel like, oh my God, it's this huge systemic issue. We need to shift the dial on what can I do? And that can actually, ironically, incentivize one to take no action. But I think that's a fallacy that one isn't seeing the result doesn't mean result isn't being made. That we have to also learn to celebrate small wins and not necessarily huge wins. And I think we have to start from the world we can control. Is it your family? Is it your local community? Modeling interdependence, modeling thinking through social impacts. And I think I'm really proud to be a millennial. And I think millennials and Gen Zs have created a systemic shift culturally where now it's mainstream to talk about impact, talk about the environment, talk about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was unheard of, right? And so I think conversations are key. Galvanizing community in small groups of like-minded people are key, whether your role is advocacy, whether your role is, community, whether your role is social impact, but just do something because the world needs you.
God, you've got the back of my neck, hairs on the back of my neck already. And you know something, this isn't what I'm really appreciate about you anyway, Nikki, but also what you're bringing today. Like there's no judgment in this, right? There's no pointing finger. There's a real open-hearted, like, what can we do as the collective? What is the actual problem? And how do we, in our immediate sphere of influence, do something about it? And I just think that's a beautiful invitation, right? You're not pointing fingers at anybody. You're not telling anybody they're right or wrong. You're just saying, hey, this is where we are, and let's get to it, which I think is really quite empowering.
I think we spending time wagging fingers is a pure waste of time. And if we really appreciate that we're a collective humanity and we need to have an urgency that the least of us impacts us, right? Then we're forced to be solutions oriented. And like you said, put judgment aside on both sides of the table. There's finger wagging on both sides of the table. For instance, you get my newsletters. So I sent out a newsletter the other week about COP26. And a friend of mine responded and was like, basically the conversation we had on the last show, when you asked me about climate change and what's Africa's perspective on it. Mm-hmm. And this friend was like, as far as I'm concerned, this is a Western issue, not an African issue. They created this problem. We want to develop, and now it's our time to rise. And I was like, yeah, that sounds theoretically sound. However, the reality of it is that it's a lot more complex than that. We are interdependent. Actually, we as Africa, we are at greatest risk from the impact of climate change. So I think it's about time we stop clenching our fists, stop gritting our teeth, stop holding judgment and wagging fingers. Because quite frankly, when we say the West contributed towards this issue, who are we talking to? Can we name a West? Because these are decisions that our ancestors made. right? A lot of the time. A lot of social issues, when you think about it, are not decisions Nike and Gary made, but these are decisions people that we've never met made. And then we start to hold animosity and judgment towards the descendants of these people who are just like, I just happen to be born into this place, right? I can't take the blame for this issue. However, we can take collective responsibility for it, right? And so I think it's really appreciating, it's not them versus us. It's not me, it's really we. And as a world, I'm first and foremost a global citizen. I'm a human being. We have to understand that our humanity has no economic threshold. It has no geographic threshold. It has no, racial. It's not defined by race or gender. We're humans, and we have to ensure that the least of us is pulled up along that journey, and we think about all of us and our future descendants.
Thanks for sharing that. There's so many mic drop moments already. I can't wait to listen back to this. But really, honestly, Nikki, because the thing that's really been on my heart and mind a lot the last 12 months in particular has just been this. As you know, I'm in the chemicals industry. That's my day job. I really care, about humanity like you in terms of, how do we reach those people at the, as you say, on the edges almost in a way? Who are the people most marginalized, most oppressed, most not seen? And I think the thing that's really, really, really hit me recently, literally last week, Nikki, I wrote down this quote, and it was something along the lines of, people in the global south. So we're talking about, of course, Africa. For those that maybe I haven't heard that term, Africa, Southeast Asia, India, the areas where you get a lot of stuff manufactured today cheaply, and then it's shipped to the West. Okay, that's the sort of what I'm talking about when I say global south. It's like the global south is an under-resourced fight for life, but not just their own life, for our lives, everybody's life. And in the north, we're in an over-resourced, excuse the language, an over-resourced, myopic, suicidal walk off the edge of the cliff, taking them with us. So it's like the very people that should be pissed off and upset because we've created this situation are not only trying to save themselves, they're trying to save everyone. But the capitalist model, we're so myopically focused on growth still, we're not only destroying them, we're destroying ourselves. And it's just this, it really came up powerfully for me last week. And again, it's not them and us, it's all of that. But it's just as a way to frame, like, it just, I just wonder what comes up for you in that moment around what I just shared, sort of anything.
I think for me, it's just an awakening that the capitalist system is insufficient for us to run our societies. And I love what you said. It's, it's myopic and it's at risk of literally imploding everyone, right? I just wish what we really need at this hour is leadership in different spheres, and from different people that have a different worldview, and different ideas as to how we can run our societies, more communal thinking, more social awareness, more awareness of the environmental impact of our actions, rather than the pursuit of the capitalist machine at the forefront, and then everyone else being relegated to the fringes as rebels of the system. Right? It's just completely heartbreaking to watch. I've never been so disappointed as I was in the last 2 weeks, particularly with COP26 and then this. But I do think our generation have it within us to shift the dial. In spite of, me being quite disappointed, I still have hope. In humanity, I think it's just a minority have dominated the discourse and entrenched ideas in our mind as to what success looks like, and what we should aspire to. And that's infiltrated all elements of society down to our academic, progression, school, to
Hmm.
professional success, what success at home looks like, what success as nations look like. But it's an invitation for greater diversity of thought, which we'll only have when we invite other people to the table.
So it's so cool. So, like, we never know where we're going to go, Nikki, do we? We never know where we're going to go. But I just love these. I just think it's so important. It just, and we're role modeling right now, right? That it's okay to have this conversation, because
Yes.
what I've realised as well is within my own work organisation in my sector, right, it's one of the most environmentally damaging sectors.
Hmm.
But what I can tell you, Nikki, is that the silence. I thought that a lot of people just weren't aware. What I'm learning is a lot more people are actually aware, but they're terrified to speak up. They're
Wow.
terrified to be in a dialogue around this sort of stuff within a corporate setting,
Hmm.
because, of course, what if I get moved on? What if? What if? What if? What if? What if? All the what ifery. And I think I want to weave this back to your previous invitation of, like, what can you do within your immediate sphere of influence?
Hmm.
Like, who's the family member you can talk to? Who's a work colleague you can speak to? Who's Nikki in a different sector or part of the world that I can have a chat with, just to share what's on my heart and mind, and what's similar, what's different about our context and our understanding. Like, it doesn't cost anything to do that, does it? It just
It
takes a bit of
doesn't.
will. And I just wonder, it's almost like, I'm making this up in the moment with you. It's like a paralysis will, like,
Mm.
gap. So it's like this sort of, like, everyone's got the ability to be willful around this, but there's a paralysis around it. And I think fear is a lot of that paralysis, is what I'm observing,
Mm.
certainly in my immediate spheres of influence. So I'm still sitting and really, what can I be doing in that sphere to invite people in to have this sort of dialogue in a way where they don't feel threatened? Maybe
Hmm.
creating the space,
Mm.
co-creating the space to allow this dialogue to happen.
I thoroughly agree. I think you kind of alluded to a lack of trust of the system. Whether that's a perception or reality is a different matter. You said, like, those in corporate are scared to kind of lead these conversations because of fear of losing their roles or their jobs, or um, being judged for it, right? I think we all have influence, and we can steward our influence. And a lot of the time, people get overwhelmed and feel kind of like they're drowning in the sea of social problems, because there's often a perception that it's all about financial contribution, raising of financial capital to solve the social issues. But often it's not. It's also deployment of social capital, um, deployment of knowledge capital, of career capital. And so, like you said, we all have people that we can influence, whether we can influence them to subscribe to our school of thought, or also we can co-create with people that probably share the same views as yourself. Oh, okay, Gary, you're also quite worried and scared about this. I am. What can we do together? How can we progress this conversation? How can we mobilize folks into action? I also think cross-border strategic collaborations are really critical, because we are a global world, and there's no point in thinking through systemic change if the very change will bring about negative implications for people halfway across the world. Like we kind of alluded to, your phone is not just your sexy iPhone, but it's also child workers potentially.
Mhm.
And that's not to attack the iPhone, by the way. It's just an example. It could be clothes, it could be shoes. It's just,
Yeah.
as consumers, I think we have to be very conscious. As humans, we just have to be very conscious at this hour, because, like I said, there's an existential risk, 1 in 60 potentially, that in the next 100 years, our Earth will not exist. It's chilling.
It's really chilling when I think about a roulette table which has got 36 numbers on, right? Like, that's pretty
Yeah,
scarily high odds of that happening.
very. And even if it were about capital, financial capital to bring about change, we do have the wealth in the world to change things, to change the dial, if we wanted to. We've got the social networks to change the dial if we wanted to. Um, the issue I just see is just particularly on government side, there's just a lot of political brownie point scoring, short-termism.
Yeah.
Yeah, just thinking
Yeah.
about that next election.
It's
And that's why I made the comment I made about families are uniquely placed to drive social change, because they're not bound by quarterly thinking or 4-year cycles. They think in generations.
you're really honestly, my whole head is just like one of the things I've wanted to be more dialogue with, which I haven't been, is like the startup space. You know, it doesn't have to be tech startup; it could be any business startup. But it's just that, you know, that energy around, as you say, that, you know, what are people designing, what are people creating today to try and, you know, solve the challenges we're discussing today. You know,
Mhm.
building a business in line with nature systems, building it as a cooperative, not as a purely revenue generating business. You know, and I've not done as much in that as I wanted to, and you're really giving me the energy to actually get off my backside and go and investigate that more. So thank you for that.
No worries at all.
So good, so good. And what's really nice when I think about this conversation today is just how it just keeps coming back to that legacy piece, right?
Mhm.
Like everything you're speaking about comes back to how sustainable is it? Will it still be here after the founder's gone or that next generation's gone? So it really feels like you're looking multi-generationally
Mhm.
out, which is actually what I'm learning is very much how indigenous tribes work, right? 7 generations.
Mhm. Mhm. That's powerful. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's only been a recent learning for me as well. Yeah,
Makes sense.
apparently it's 7 generations that which explains a lot, right? Like if
It
you're
does.
living in, you know, living in the Amazon and you've got used to the different, you know, what's your healing plant, what's a safe food to eat, what bit of bark do you use for your accommodation? It's not the sort of thing you can just learn in 4 years and hand down, right?
Mhm. And I think as a society at large, we've created this pecking order of sophistication and civilization, and the indigenous communities are the tribal backward ones, and we've got all the answers, and we just need to export the answers to them, whether it's technology or know-how or what have you. And I think we should be quite embarrassed by that. We need to be more curious and invite. There's generations of wisdom, of knowledge, of intelligence that are in these communities that we've snobbed because we think we are better than. Um, but we're really missing out on wisdom that could give us keys to the social issues we're facing right now.
My God, whenever I speak with Nikki, like my whole body's upper body's like reacting big time. But it's not just excitement. It's a real, like, there's like an activist energy in this beautiful conversation today, right? It's not, we're not sitting here Pollyanna, like it's somebody else's job to do. Like you're doing the work. I'm increasingly trying to embody the conversation we're having. But that particular piece for me is something I've learned through my spiritual guide over the last 12 months, Nikki, is,
Mm,
and I don't speak about this much so far because it's not been the right context, but there's a very real risk, exactly what you spoke to just then, is
mm,
the risk of recolonizing the sustainability agenda. So
mm,
suddenly you've got a load of technology companies, you've got a load of NGOs that are all based in the West, dictating what those in India and Africa and, you know, Southeast Asia, what they should be doing to get out of the hole that they haven't created for themselves. And if we're not centering their views of the world, if they're not front and center, not aside, not the afterthought, like front and center, as you just described, we risk recolonizing all of this good work. We risk recolonizing the agenda again, and it
that's
blew my mind. Blew my
that.
mind.
That is powerful. I think equally on the other side, for those in those communities in Africa and Southeast Asia, there must be. I've come across a lot of folks that we have an identity crisis, an identity one of we for the longest time society has told us that we are less than, right? We are um, we are to be saved by the colonizers, culturally, economically, and what have you. And a lot of us have suppressed our identities um, to to mimic the West and are waiting on the Western savior, not acknowledging within, like you've kind of alluded to, within our indigenous communities, there's a lot of wisdom. That it was this wisdom that kept these communities going for generations and generations, for thousands of years, right? So it's also an invitation for those from those communities to acknowledge the greatness of their cultures and of within themselves, so that they can, at that hour, challenge, like you said, this risk of recolonization of the sustainability agenda. And they can project their voices without tremor, without trepidation, fully authentically, not just for their communities, but for also the future generations. Like you said, it's the very indigenous communities that think more legacy and more future oriented. And we have to be great ancestors. Otherwise, unfortunately, we won't have a world to pass down to our children or grandchildren. It's heartbreaking.
Wow, what a powerful exploration. I think it's just a beautiful way to wrap up today, Nikki. I just let's half an hour flow gone. And what a way to spend it with you, honestly. I just think we've covered so much ground, and isn't it amazing where you go from just one simple question?
It's powerful. Thank you so much. I had such an amazing time.
Please check out Nikki's details. They've been scrolling across the bottom if you're watching us on the video. This will be repurposed as a podcast conversation as well. Please do check out Nikki's website, nikianani.com, one word. Is it Anani or is it?
Yeah, it is.
God, I just realised, I was like, oh my God, don't muck it up. You should have asked first. I'm glad I got it right.
It is.
But thank you, Nikki. Really appreciate everything.
Thank you. Thank you for the light, and thank you for the work that you're doing. It's special. The world needs you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nikki. Thanks everyone for joining. If you watch this live or watch this back, take care. Have a great afternoon or evening. Take care.